We are finally getting close to approaching spooky season, which, as somebody trying to sell books of ghost stories and like ghost-related merch, is, I mean, oh, thank goodness. Now, if you haven't seen much Star Trek or you haven't watched it in a while, you might be wondering why I am celebrating spooky season by making a video about Star Trek, which is better known for morality plays and funny episodes, or very, very serious episodes, but of the type that talk about the morality of war and stuff like that, rather than the kind of spooky, scary Halloween variety. But in fact, there are loads of Star Trek episodes that are perfect viewing for Halloween. Some of them have more overt Halloween-y themes, others are just really, really freaking scary. So in this video, I thought I would list 15 of the best from across the Star Trek franchise. Although there are, at this point, more than 15 different branches of the Star Trek franchise, and some of them are aimed at children or are primarily comedic, so we won't have an example from every bit of it here. If you're new here, hi, I'm Juliet. I'm a writer and historian, and on this channel I cover history, literature and pop culture relating to the weird and the spooky, as well as to myth, legend and folklore in general. Let's get into it. And Editing Jules here, just to add a very quick spoiler alert. I do tend to get carried away when I talk about Star Trek, so I have aimed to keep spoilers to a minimum because I appreciate that, unlike me, not everybody has seen every episode and every movie of Star Trek ever made. But there will be some spoilers ahead. If you are very spoiler phobic, you may want to skip to the chapters featuring the episodes that you've already seen. Because I am an historian, that is how I make my living, it's my day job, I have a tendency to include a bit of historical context at the beginning of videos. When I did a video about Doctor Who, I think I described the history of Doctor Who. I can't remember how long I spent doing that. I'm not going to do that this time. I think even if you've never seen an episode of Star Trek in your life, you probably have a basic idea of what it is. It is a TV show and some movies about a kind of military-style crew on a spaceship in space. It has Captain Kirk in it. I suspect that, like, most people don't need to be told that, and a lot of people clicking on the video may be very familiar with Star Trek. So, in lieu of my usual historical background and context, instead, I'm just going to give you my personal ranking of the various different branches of the Star Trek universe from worst to best. I will say that this is like ranking flavours of chocolate. There isn't a single one that I don't like. I love all of Star Trek. There is not a version of Star Trek I do not enjoy to some extent and on some level. But obviously I'm a human being with tastes, and there are some that I enjoy more than others. So here is very briefly my rundown of the various branches of the Star Trek universe in the order in which I enjoy them. Number 17, very short treks. Most of these were awful, but there was one good one, the one with Neelix in it. Number 16, short treks. I have a personal preference for full-length episodes that are on a streaming service or a TV channel, or a movie on a TV channel or in a theatre. I am not the biggest fan of obscure little shorts that get buried on the internet in any franchise, and many franchises I love do them. Number 15, Discovery. I like Discovery, I don't hate it. I'm less keen on the first couple of seasons, especially season 1. To me, it just doesn't feel like Star Trek, and I'm less keen on heavily arc-based plotting, depending on the show. I absolutely love Game of Thrones, that's its own thing. Star Trek is not Game of Thrones. I like Star Trek to be episodic. If I start talking about that, we'll be here all day. But it is a personal preference of mine. So the heavily arc-based plotting isn't so much to my taste. I do prefer the later seasons of Discovery. I would have enjoyed it more if Michael Burnham had just been the captain from the beginning, instead of doing this weird, we're going to follow the first officer as the main character thing. I love Jason Isaacs, but that whole storyline also, I mean, it was quite interesting, but it just didn't feel like Star Trek, especially that first season. I do enjoy the later seasons more. The other problem with the arc plotting in Discovery is that quite a lot of the arc plots I just don't particularly like. And when you don't like the plot that covers the whole season, it's a problem. Number 14, the animated series. Very cheap animation, but some really interesting ideas, many of which have been picked up by later series. Number 13, Section 31, the TV movie. I quite enjoyed it. I think its flaws have been fairly well covered. It was kind of fun. Number 12, Enterprise. Some characters on Enterprise are much better developed than others. I really want to like Hoshi and Travis. I like the actors, I like the idea of those characters, they're just not all that well developed. But there are some great episodes in Enterprise. Number 11, Original Series. Obviously quite dated by now, but still holds up surprisingly well, let down by its final episode, Turnabout Intruder, which is horrifying. Number 10, Picard. The third season is my favourite, although it is sheer pandering to the fans the entire way through. Made some interesting choices, but I absolutely love it for Captain 7 of 9, which is my current Star Trek cosplay of choice. Number 9, the Abrams-verse movies, or the Kelvin Universe movies. I like the first one, I like the third one, I don't like the second one. If I want to watch Wrath of Khan, I'll just watch Wrath of Khan. Number 8, this one is controversial, Deep Space Nine. I know lots and lots of people for whom it is their favourite. I refer you back to my earlier point about my preference for episodic over arc-based plotting. Deep Space Nine is also a little bit on the depressing side. Sometimes. They all can be. But Deep Space Nine in particular, I mean, half the regular cast are terrorists and it's just not my favourite. Number 7, the movies starring the cast of The Next Generation. First Contact is a work of genius, the others are fine. Number 6, Prodigy. I absolutely adore it because it is basically Janeway Chakotay fanfiction from Voyager made into a show for kids. I do worry that I don't know how much it appeals to kids because so much of it is referring back to earlier series of Star Trek, but as a fan of earlier series of Star Trek, I love it. Number 5, Lower Decks. Sometimes the humour goes a bit far for me, especially in its first episode. It did tone it down a little bit after that, but I love it. Great fun, brilliant series. Number 4, Next Generation. I mean, it's an era-defining sci-fi show. Slightly rough beginning, got its dud episodes, but brilliant. Number 3, the original series movies. These and Next Generation were my introduction to Star Trek. I saw Wrath of Khan and I saw the TNG two-parter Best of Both Worlds at a very impressionable age, and that is why I am a Trekkie. Number 2, Strange New Worlds. I adore Strange New Worlds, and I will always have a fondness for Discovery, even though I ranked it so low, because without Discovery we wouldn't have Strange New Worlds. And number 1, Voyager. I can admit that maybe, objectively, Strange New Worlds might be a slightly higher quality show than Voyager, but I absolutely adore Voyager, partly because I genuinely enjoy the series. I don't understand why people were so critical of it at the time, back in the 90s when it aired, and everybody was very rude about it. I have always loved Voyager, and I also have lots and lots of sentimental reasons for loving Voyager. I watched it with my family growing up. I watched it with my best friends from school. We went to a convention to celebrate the end of the series. We met the cast, who were all absolutely lovely. It was a brilliant convention. It's also one of the things that brought me and my husband together because we both love the show and it's our favourite Star Trek. So yeah, Voyager has an incredibly special place in my heart. Which is partly why my husband bought me the Lower Decks Tom Paris plate. I met Robbie McNeil at the convention way back in 2001, and oh, that was a very, very exciting moment for 18-year-old me. And honourable mention, Galaxy Quest. Okay, and with no further ado, we will get on to the list of scary, spooky, Halloween-appropriate episodes. Quick dishonourable mention, I am not going to list The Next Generation's Sub Rosa, otherwise known as the one where Beverly Crusher has intimate relations with a ghost. It's an alien, but it's a ghost. It's like a really bad cut-price Outlander, except Outlander didn't exist yet. It's not good. It belongs on a different type of list. But given that this is about Halloween-type Star Trek episodes, I had to briefly mention it, if only to say that I'm definitely not including it. Number 15, Catspaw, the original series. This one is really a little bit more cheesy than scary. It features an implausibly powerful alien being playing dangerous games with the crew, including a hefty dose of fantasy. It is not the only episode of the original series that answers that description. That applies to several episodes of the original series, and eventually gave us the concept of Q in The Next Generation as well. But anyway, this one is Halloween themed, and it has a spooky castle and witchcraft and Halloween-looking costumes. It's got a Halloween vibe, basically. Of course, Captain Kirk solves the problem by flirting with it. But there is a genuinely scary moment where the villain uses sympathetic magic to overheat the Enterprise by dangling a model of it over a candle flame, and that is actually genuinely pretty freaky. Number 14, Wolf in the Fold, the original series. This is the one where Scotty is Jack the Ripper. It's so bizarre. If you've never watched Star Trek, the original series, it is really, like, the later series take themselves much more seriously in some ways as pieces of science fiction. Or maybe it's just that the tropes and the things people were interested in science fiction in the 60s were different. But the original series has some really out there concepts. And in this one, basically, Jack the Ripper is stalking the corridors of the Enterprise. Jack the Ripper turns out to be an alien entity, obviously, a very long-lived alien entity. This episode is creepy in all the bad ways because it involves some seriously dubious misogyny from Captain Kirk and Scotty, but it also involves implying that Scotty might really be a serial killer throughout the episode, which is a genuinely scary and creepy concept. So it is kind of like a bit of a slasher story-ish. And marrying that with the idea that one of our heroes could be really kind of twisted. And then the idea of being possessed by Jack the Ripper, that is the conclusion, is pretty freaky too. Number 13, Context is for Kings, Discovery. This was only Discovery's third episode, and it makes the list mainly for being really gory. It's very spooky. It's one of many, many Star Trek episodes where they have to go and investigate what has happened to a ship where everybody has died. And this one includes a lot of body horror. The bodies of the crew of Discovery's sister ship are twisted and mangled, and we see a lot more of that gore than we're used to seeing on Star Trek. Although other Star Trek shows have had some pretty creepy concepts, actually seeing a lot of gore is more unusual. This is also from early on in Discovery, where we have this very, I don't want to spoil it for anyone who hasn't seen it. The captain is not the sort of upstanding character that we're used to from Starfleet captains, let's put it that way. The lead character, Michael Burnham, is a mutineer. The engineer Stamets, who's one of my favourite characters, is at his absolute frostiest. He mellowed out more as time went on, although he still remained gloriously grumpy. But basically the whole episode has this kind of atmosphere of horror and dread, and then the unusual level of gore really adds to that in this case. I'm not particularly a fan of gory horror. I prefer spooky to gory. I don't really like gory things, but this made a fairly effective use of it. Number 12, Dead Stop, Enterprise. What I really like about this one is that it gets its creepiness and its scariness from a very different vibe to a lot of horror, and indeed to a lot of the other episodes on this list. Other episodes that I've been talking about have featured gothic mansions, dark, abandoned spaceships, creepy vibes. This is another episode of the crew exploring an unfamiliar ship, although in this case it's the Enterprise crew who are in need of rescue. They need repairs, and this mysterious alien ship looks like it's the answer. And it's all very, very white. Bright white light and empty spaces. The ideal of a spaceship, but directed by Voyager's Roxanne Dawson, who played B'Elanna Torres on Star Trek Voyager. She directs it to look so creepy, rather than these bright white open spaces looking futuristic and clean and impressive like they are normally filmed to look, and especially this is made in the early noughties, and kind of white minimalism was very fashionable shortly before that. In this episode, the sheer emptiness is creepy. Dawson also voices the mysterious computer who the crew have to deal with, and I think they get to a real deep down terror for a lot of us when Archer desperately pleads, "I need to talk to a person." It's very unsettling, and it's a really interesting and unusual type of unsettling. Number 11, The Man Trap, the original series. Although this is not either of Star Trek the original series' pilots, The Cage or Where No Man Has Gone Before, it was actually the first episode to air. So people who watched Star Trek from the very, very beginning did know what to expect in terms of horror. Star Trek is very good at horror when it chooses to do it. In this case, the horror comes from the alien/monster of the week, the salt vampire, which is what it sounds like, an alien that removes the salt from you. The creature design on it is great. It's got this gaping, toothy mouth, drooping eyes, a yeti-like body. It's very freaky to look at, so that obviously makes it scary and brings in that horror aspect. But quick spoiler warning if you haven't seen the episode, skip to the next chapter if you don't want to be spoiled. Spoiler warning, spoiler warning, spoiler warning. It's actually the revelation at the end that's the creepiest thing, because it turns out that Dr. McCoy's ex was killed by the creature long ago, and her husband has willingly accepted the creature that killed her as a replacement for her. And that's really creepy. Number 10, Shuttle to Kenfori, Strange New Worlds. By far the most recent entry on the list. This is from the season of Strange New Worlds that is currently airing, but I had to include it because Pike actually says the word zombies in this episode. There have been quite a few episodes of Star Trek that dealt with something that was clearly like zombies, that behaved like zombies, was standing in for zombies. But normally no one actually says the Z word, but Pike actually calls them zombies. In this episode, Pike and Mbenga are on an unofficial mission. They have taken a shuttle because they're not really supposed to be there, and they've gone to this forbidden planet. And there are no life signs apart from plants and themselves, and you just kind of know sort of what direction this is going from there. But it does its horror movie tropes very well and very effectively, and quick spoiler warning, it also does a very good job of picking off the members of the cast who are not Pike or Mbenga over the course of the episode. Number 9, The Adversary, Deep Space Nine. This one's a bit cheeky because it opens with Sisko saying he is recording my final commander's log because he's been promoted to captain. But it makes it sound kind of creepy and final from the get-go. This is your classic story of there being a traitor in your midst and you don't know who it is. In this case, it's because the bad guy is a changeling and could look like anybody. Again, a very classic trope that you see across sci-fi, many different contexts. Owes quite a bit to The Thing as well. But the episode is well made, it's claustrophobic, it's creepily done, and Sisko gets to play with the auto-destruct within about 5 minutes of becoming captain, which really cements his position as a Starfleet captain, because you've got to tinker with the auto-destruct every now and again. As a Starfleet captain, it's basically obligatory. Number 8, Vanishing Point, Enterprise. There are many episodes of both the various branches of Star Trek and other sci-fi series as well that do a story where one character seems to have died and exists as a ghost, and they walk around their own ship or airbase, if it's Stargate SG-1 or wherever they happen to be, and they usually eventually turn out to be out of phase. They have somehow ended up half in another dimension. They're out of phase with this one. Do you know, I've watched millions of these episodes and I've never actually paid attention to the technobabble explanation. But anyway, out of phase is the usual explanation. This is similar to an out of phase episode, but freakier. I should mention there is also a Voyager episode where Chakotay's literal ghost walks around the ship doing freaky ghost stuff, which I couldn't fit onto the list because there just wasn't room while his body is comatose in sickbay, so there's that too. This episode is very similar to an out of phase episode in that it involves Hoshi appearing to be dead and to be a ghost, but it adds several extra elements and it has a different explanation. So it adds a lot of body horror. Usually an out of phase episode will focus on the surviving or, not out of phase people giving eulogies for the apparently dead crew member and the kind of unsettling nature of the whole thing and a lot of contemplation about life after death and so on. This focuses more on body horror. Birthmarks move, Hoshi's ability to translate starts to fade, and then she seems to be becoming a ghost. She slowly loses the ability to touch things properly, and she even starts to vanish. So it's spookier and freakier than the usual just, I'm walking around but no one can see or hear me. And again, a quick spoiler warning, if you haven't seen the episode, skip to the next chapter. The reveal is not only quite creepy for Hoshi, it has a very creepy kind of implication for an episode of Next Generation. The reveal is that Hoshi was stuck in the transporter buffer for 8.3 seconds. In Enterprise, transporter technology is still relatively new. And all of the episode happened to her in those 8.3 seconds. In Star Trek The Next Generation's Relics, Scotty was in the transporter buffer for 80 years. What on earth happened to him? No wonder he was a bit freaked out when he came out. Number 7, And the Children Shall Lead, the original series. The cold open of this episode features a group of children dancing around happily singing a strange version of Ring a Ring a Roses at the site of a mass adult suicide. So that's horrifying. Later on, they move around in a circle, chanting a call to a friendly angel, which produces a green translucent being who wants universal control, and then they set about driving the crew of the Enterprise mad using bizarre hallucinations, including premature aging, planets that aren't there, and all sorts of other things. I don't think I really need to say much more about why this episode is on the list of scary, spooky episodes. I mean, go back and listen to that description again if you're not sure. I will also add that the ending is once more where the real emotional horror drops. Quick spoiler warning, although to be honest this is kind of covered by the setup. Basically, when they come out from under the influence of this alien creature, the children suddenly realise what happened to their parents. And it's awful. Number 6, Coda, Voyager. This is another episode where a crew member appears to have died, although the explanation is not out of phase in this case either. In this case, it's Captain Janeway. At first, it looks like she's stuck in a time loop, and we're used to characters dying in time loop episodes. If you've seen the Supernatural time loop episode, oh boy, does a character die in that one over and over and over and over and over again. So we've got a sort of a mashup of two very familiar episodes of science fiction here. We've got the out of phase episode, albeit with a different explanation, and we've got the time loop episode, which very frequently involves somebody dying and then you have to try and work out how to change the loop so they don't die. This one is a bit more sinister though, and again this relates to the conclusion, so spoiler warning, skip to the next chapter if you haven't seen this episode and you don't want to be spoiled. It turns out that this is a sinister alien who is trying to convince Janeway to follow him to the afterlife, even at one point taking on the form of her father to try and convince her to go with him, and he is quite convincing. And then Janeway kind of eventually works out that this isn't, if there is an afterlife, this isn't it, and that this is actually a creepy alien. And then when she eventually works that out and she's, going to get away, he implies that he will be waiting at the point of death for her and everyone else whenever and wherever she eventually dies. Dear goodness, that's creepy. So all of us, when we die, just get, harvested by a creepy alien. Nice. Let's hope it was actually just confined to the Delta Quadrant. Number 5, Impulse, Enterprise. More zombies! This is the Vulcan zombie episode. It has an incredibly short cold open with just a screaming T'Pol being brought into sickbay, completely out of control, then cut to credits. Jolene Blalock puts in an absolutely brilliant performance, and it's filmed with all this shaky camera work that really gives it the feel of... It's a horror movie. This is a 45-minute horror movie, plain and simple. And there are other episodes on this list that are a bit like that, but in terms of, literally, I fancy watching a horror movie that stars some characters from Star Trek, this is the one you want. Number 4, Empok Nor, Deep Space Nine. Very, very similar. This one is also, basically, a 45-minute horror movie. In this case, a handful of regular characters have gone on a mission with a collection of other characters who, if they were in the original series, would be wearing red shirts. They've gone scavenging on Deep Space Nine's abandoned sister station. So Deep Space Nine is obviously originally a Cardassian space station that Starfleet have taken over. That's why it looks weird and different to other Starfleet stations. So it's an abandoned Cardassian space station that they're scavenging from. So it's creepy already. It features unhinged Cardassians, lots of dark corridors, people being picked off one by one, a regular character under the influence of psychotropic drugs, and some jump scares. And it gives Andrew Robinson's Garrick a brilliant chance to play the more sinister side of the character, which is always great to see whenever that happens. Incidentally, if you're wondering why so many of these appear to be set on the sister ship or sister space station, well, you're probably not wondering, because the explanation is the boringly obvious: it saves money. The Tholian Web was another quite scary original series episode that I didn't have room for on this list, and it was set on the Enterprise's sister ship. You don't need any new sets, you just redress the sets you already have, and you call it a sister ship or a sister space station. Job done. Number 3, Scientific Method, Voyager. All of the episodes that I'm talking about will give a science fiction explanation for whatever's going on, because Star Trek is a science fiction show. Although it occasionally incorporates elements of spirituality, and particularly Vulcan spirituality and Bajoran spirituality, it is a science fiction show, and the aim is always to have some kind of science fiction justification or reason or explanation for whatever's going on. So you don't have a vampire, you have an alien salt vampire. You don't have a ghost, you have an alien entity, and so on. Scientific Method, as you can tell from the title, is a bit different from some of the other examples in that it's not kind of giving a science fiction explanation for a trope like vampires or zombies or whatever that's normally in horror. This is very much a piece of science fiction. It's just a really creepy, terrifying piece of science fiction. In this episode, the characters who are out of phase are the visiting aliens, and they are doing so in order to hide themselves from Voyager's crew so that they can perform medical experiments on the crew, some of which have fatal results, all of which have varying levels of body horror results. The creepiest scene in it that lives in my brain is there's a bit where Seven of Nine is able to see the aliens. The Doctor has done something to her Borg implants to make her able to see the aliens that no one else can see. And she walks into Captain Janeway's ready room to tell the captain what's going on, obviously. And there's Janeway, who's been having migraines for days, and she's surrounded by two of these kind of translucent-looking aliens, and she's got these spikes in her head. Massive spikes, sticking out of her head, and Janeway can't see the spikes or the aliens. All she can feel is the pain. And as somebody who has suffered migraines for years, that lives rent-free in my brain. That freaks me out. And then there's a whole sequence where Seven has to walk through the ship and try not to let on to these aliens that she can see them. So there's a bit where they're coming right up to her with all their weird little instruments and stuff. She has to stand there and try and pretend she can't see them. It's just really well written and well directed and just so creepy, and a very different type of horror. I suppose it's the experimental scientist type of horror, isn't it? So there are other movies and whatnot that cover that kind of thing. They're not the type that I usually go for because I'm more about the ghosts. But this episode of Voyager is brilliant. 2. Schisms, The Next Generation. This also lives rent-free in my head, the whole thing. This episode had the brilliant idea of doing an alien abduction episode on a spaceship. The episode actually predates The X-Files. It came out in 1992 and The X-Files premiered in 1993. But there was clearly something in the air in the early 90s involving alien abductions. And this is an alien abduction story where members of the Enterprise crew are being abducted by aliens, but from their spaceship rather than from their farm in Iowa or whatever. I love the basic idea. Alien abduction stories are not my favourite thing. I adore The X-Files with all my heart, but I like the more kind of paranormal, supernatural episodes and less the alien abduction stuff, which is the least interesting to me. Also, again, see earlier comment on my preference for episodic over arc-based. But this alien abduction story is done so well, and it's so frightening. Like Scientific Method, it involves body horror, things being done to the bodies of Enterprise crew members, up to and including fatal consequences, that they can't work out why it's happening. There's a moment where they realise that Riker's arm has been amputated and sewn back on without him even knowing it. And there's something really creepy about that idea. Creepiest of all, though, is the scene at the centre of the episode where they go onto the holodeck and it's Riker and Troy and some other random crew member that we don't really know, expendable ensign of the week. And they try and recreate what's been going on from their scattered memories, and they join up together. They all kind of say, oh, I remember seeing this and I remember hearing this. And they get the holodeck to kind of put together a bit of a kind of futuristic photo fit of the aliens and what's been happening, although you can't see the aliens. All you can see is their instruments, which kind of go click, 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 and they're on this operating table type thing, and there's this clicking noise, and it's in the holodeck, which the TNG holodeck is black with yellow grid on it, and they don't bother creating an environment in the holodeck. They just get it to produce the image of this kind of alien operating table and clicking things. And so, of course, it's just got this black with yellow lines background around it, and they're in the middle of this black room with this clicking noise, trying to remember this. Oh, it's so creepy. It's so well done. It's brilliant. I love it. Number 1, The Thaw, Voyager. This features Michael McKean as a terrifying clown. That may be enough for you to know why it's number 1, but there is more. This episode is just so unsettling. When I first watched it, I didn't like it. I kind of do now. I feel like I know what it is now. But it's so freaky. It's so unsettling and so creepy to watch. Basically, the plot is that the The Voyager crew rescue some aliens who are stuck in a virtual environment. And it has a similar premise to The Matrix. It actually came out before The Matrix, a little bit before The Matrix. But the idea is basically, because this virtual environment is kind of keyed into their brains, if they die in the virtual environment, they die in reality of essentially a heart attack. So there's a bit where somebody gets their head chopped off. So in reality, on Voyager, their head is obviously still there, but they die of massive heart failure. It's basically, they're literally being killed by fear, because nothing is happening to their physical bodies. It's all happening in this virtual environment that's keyed into their brains. So the whole episode is about literally dying of fear. What's happened is that they went into stasis to avoid some kind of disaster on their planet, whatever it was, and the virtual environment that they set up so that they could kind of chill out and have a good time while they were in stasis was taken over by this artificial intelligence in the form of a terrifying clown played by Michael McKean. So the aliens are trapped in an unending nightmare, kept in a state of constant, perpetual fear by a garish collection of extremely unnerving characters who behave in very odd and exaggerated and unnerving ways, in a way deliberately designed to make the kind of biological aliens as freaked out at all times as possible. And when Voyager crew members go into the virtual environment to try and work out what's happening and to try and help the aliens and to rescue them, they then get trapped as well. It's so uncomfortable. It's so scary. Yeah, this is a horror movie of a type I don't usually watch, but I have come to appreciate the episode. And it does have a very satisfying conclusion. Spoiler warning if you haven't seen the episode. Janeway, I love Captain Janeway, one of my favourite characters in Star Trek. Unsurprising, Voyager is my favourite show. And she works out that fear really wants to be conquered. And it's just a really clever ending. It's a very clever ending to a very interesting and clever episode. It's never going to make my top 10 of favourite episodes of Voyager, but I have come to appreciate it a lot more as time goes on for what it is and for how clever and well done it is. Also, I really like Harry Kim. I met Garrett Wong at a convention. He's absolutely lovely, and I'm quite fond of Harry Kim as a character. But for anyone who, shall we say, isn't, you can watch Harry Kim get tortured as well in this episode. So there we have it, 15 scary, spooky, creepy, Halloween vibe episodes of Star Trek to watch as we go into spooky season if you fancy dipping your toe. Or if you've never watched Star Trek but you like horror, maybe give one of these a go. If you enjoyed the video, please do give it a like, subscribe to the channel if you enjoy content on weird and spooky stuff, as well as kind of history and myth and folklore. If you would like to support the channel, I have my merch, which hopefully is good for Halloween. I do own so many Star Trek related outfits, but I'm wearing my own merch today, so I didn't get to show off any of my Star Trek outfits. Although I did wear my Lower Decks Ritos t-shirt to make a video about Stonehenge last year, because it's just part of my regular clothing. Anyway, I need to sell my own merch at the moment. So I've got various spooky themed t-shirts, hoodies, mugs, etc. available at my website, which is linked below. If you want some spooky reading material, do consider buying one of my books. Creepy Classics, Ghost Stories from Ancient Rome and Ghost Stories from Ancient Greece. I will be adding a third coming out this autumn, either Haunting Tales for Winter, or Haunting Christmases, or Haunting Yuletides. I need to decide on a title. The third volume will basically cover historical ghost stories that take place on or around Christmas and New Year's, basically. Anyway, if you'd like to support the channel, do consider picking up a copy. They're available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Apple, Fable, Kobo, all the places, paperback or ebook. I hope you enjoyed the video. I will be looking for more excuses to talk about Star Trek. Because my channel is myth and folklore and ghosts and paranormal stuff and magic, and you know, none of it generally applies to Star Trek very much. I could definitely easily do another round of spooky and scary episodes of Star Trek, because there's plenty of them. I could look at all the various ways Star Trek has done ghost stories. That might be another idea. Anyway, if this video does well, I will try and find more excuses to talk about Star Trek, because basically it makes me happy to talk about Star Trek. But there are also plenty of other things to talk about as well, and I need to finish reading Frankenstein, because that's something I definitely need to make a video on soon. Meantime, thank you so much for watching, and until next time, bye! Hello, Loki. Keeping me company while I edit. What a good boy. What a good boy.